quarter and break it up and sell enough to my buddies. I buy 2 grams for $5. It was wicked. And so if it was legally available, I might not have had that opportunity. My friends would have been just as likely to get it, you know, for the $10 a gram off someone of an adult age, if that were possible at all. And otherwise, the purity and quality of that would be regulated in that system. So there'd be a lot of incentive for, you know, the young people that were, you know, really striving to do drugs to get it off the regulated system. And the amount of minors selling drugs to other kids would be dramatically reduced if we could have, you know, proper education with kids about drugs, so that they weren't going to go and try using different drugs that had a higher likelihood of leading to problems, and they knew what they were using and how much and how to do that responsibly. And so they don't make a greater point of that in this list, but the way that youth are drawn into the drug trade, essentially, you know, making it easier to make a lot of money very quickly and easily without an education at a very young age. In fact, under Prohibition right now, if a young person's caught using or especially selling drugs on a school grounds, they're kicked out of that high school for 3 days or possibly longer. And what are they going to go do but hang out with people that don't have a job or anything else to do but drugs? And so often the way that youth are punished puts them in a position where they're almost encouraged to do it more. Information about product availability, price, and product quality would be available. Advertising would convey information about the unique features of a particular brand. Again, you know, more information needs to be available about the drugs that people are using. Another good example is ecstasy and crystal meth. It's sad to see how many young people think they're doing ecstasy, and there's a certain amount of methamphetamines basically mixed in it, and they end up being attracted to those pills because they seem to keep them awake and stimulate them more, but it's because they're doing a different drug than they're expecting. And so really, in terms of the negative consequences of drugs, having them standardized and labeled and stuff, and with proper education is critically important, because people are going to use drugs regardless of what policies or rules are in place. If a person is in enough pain or miserable enough or just wants to go and party, or for whatever reason people start using illicit or drugs, legal or illegal, you know, it's obvious that the laws are not going to be effective, and people essentially refuse to allow these to exist. In fact, in the United States, and again, these are not recent statistics, but in 1995, the costs associated with Prohibition were essentially estimated at cost and lost revenue, $110 billion. Again, this is 1995. 12 billion of that is in healthcare costs. The rest, mostly, again, would have been expenditure on enforcement and stuff. I wasn't able to find numbers for the same year, but they're close enough. 40 years later, they estimated that in the US, $63 billion got spent on illegal drugs that year. So what I find to be amazing is that the amount of money spent on illegal drugs in the United States in 1999, if you know, we can just kind of add on a little bit from the 110 number, let's just say by 99 it was $125,000 that was expenses and stuff. The government of the United States spent twice as much dealing with the costs of Prohibition and lost revenue as people actually spent on the drugs in the first place. If the government would have gone and paid that $63 million, or billion, 63 billion, they would have saved their citizens $63 billion in costs that they could have spent on food or something else, and then save themselves another 63 million, or billion I should say, sorry, because the expenses and stuff would have been substantially less. Again, 12 billion compared to 120 billion, it's about 10% of the expenses for the prohibition are actually on the healthcare costs associated with drug use. So sorry, the $63 billion on drugs, $12 billion estimated in healthcare costs. It would have saved a tremendous amount of money, again, if the government would just buy the drugs. But it points to the fact that the people of the United States would prefer to spend their hard-earned money at times, or ripped off, I guess, which is in some sense hard-earned, I guess, with great risk. But people will take great risk or work really hard to pay for these drugs despite all of the various risks. And so the success of prohibition is very unlikely, to be sure. The crime and corruption that results from prohibition, taxation, regulations, and other policy options would be eliminated. And the amount of crime and corruption within this issue is really often underestimated. Certainly here in North America, it's relatively well hidden. You don't see many occasions where people in authority figures get caught with their hands in the cookie jar, per se. If rich, powerful people are involved, and they quite likely are in this country, they've got themselves at a very great distance. But there are some people around this world that are thriving in the drug trade. And I have this one book of a character, I guess he goes by the name Oro. I'm not sure how to pronounce his heir. But this book here is written about his drug cartel, essentially mostly cannabis, I think, cultivation in Central and South America, and smuggling it up here to Canada. There's a huge joint in his hand and a gun strapped to him here. And I believe part of the story, and I haven't read it in full myself, talks about how in small Central and South American countries, the governments are completely corrupt for the most part, and it's very easy to buy off officials or threaten them. In fact, I think it was just this morning I heard about in Mexico, the one and only cop in one of their major cities who was being honest and not being bought out has actually had to run here to Canada for his own safety, because thugs like this guy have essentially taken over many areas of Central and South America. And the devastation goes far beyond the sort of corruption and problems that happen even in the government. I have this other neat book here on opium and foreign policy that gets quite into how the opium prohibitions of last century and early this century really caused enormous problems in Asia and around the world. And I'll just read a little bit. To small-time drug traffickers and growers of narcotics, control at the source and related anti-narcotic measures constitute a kind of cultural warfare. Such measures deny the legitimacy of how they make sense of the world around them. And South America is a perfect example with what's happened with the cocoa plant and how it was used indigenously and still is. I think it's Ecuador that Bolivia. The president of the cocoa farmers of Bolivia is the president of that country now, and they're making all sorts of products from soap to tea and drinks out of the cocoa plant down there. And it's really something that, again, and here it is, U.S. drug control officials have rarely appreciated the possible consequences of their intended actions on other cultures. In a related vein, the baleful ecological and sanitary side effects of unchecked demand reveal the deadly arrogance of organized traffickers and drug consumers. Societal destruction